Rights and Compliance Director for the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. I am a South Asian woman of early 50s with brown hair, and I'm wearing a black suit with a teal shirt. On behalf of everyone at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights, we welcome you to our 2025 summit entitled Disability Rights Compliance Beyond Accessibility. This event is truly a labor of love for our staff and external partners. We've been planning this summit for quite a while, several months, and we're looking forward to a meaningful and accessible conference for everyone. Registration for this event did cap very early in the process, about a week after we opened registration. We noticed that we had met our capacity, and I think that speaks very highly to the need and demand to elevate the platform of the disability community when it comes to accessibility and inclusion. We know that there are many conversations and other voices that need to be brought to the table, but today we're focusing on employment, healthcare, and the digital world when it comes to inclusion and accessibility. These sessions were carefully selected with input from the community. We did ask through our social media and contacts that folks vote on the topics to be discussed today. So thank you very much for showing up and answering the call and being here today. Before we begin our programming, I'm just going to review our housekeeping and roadmap for the day for accessibility purposes. We are going to read a lot of things, instructions out, so please bear with me a moment. There are ASL interpreters and CART services in every session. If you do experience any communication issue at any time, please let one of our staff know. We have several people wearing the blue shirts today, but also we have floaters that you'll see walking around that are happy to help you with anything. We want to make sure that you have an accessible experience today. If you wish to comment or pose a question, every session will have note cards on the table. If you want to write your question down, we'll have floaters collecting those questions throughout each session. But during the Q&A portion, if you prefer to ask a question individually, we just ask that you wait for a microphone to be brought to you or an interpreter if you require one. And very importantly, we ask that everyone please identify yourself before speaking. For example, I said, this is Tyra speaking, or this is Tyra Khan. We just want to make sure that the interpreters and CART services can identify those who are sharing valuable information today. There are tables reserved at every session for close vision seating, or if you require interpreters, please feel free to fill in those seats. We are offering sensory bags for this conference. We have 20 orange bags that are at a table outside of this room, and they have different types of fidget toys, earbuds, and some other items in there. You can check them out for the day on a first-come, first-served basis. We invite you to utilize those fidget toys as needed throughout the conference. We want you to bring your whole self today so you don't have to use them outside of the sessions. But if you do need to step outside and have a moment of quiet or reflection, we have a privacy room that is located to the left of this space out in the lobby. You'll have to go around the corner past the women's bathrooms, and there is a door that is signed for the sensory privacy room. That space is not going to be used for making phone calls or doing work. We just want to preserve that space for the folks who need it. But if you do require to step out and make a phone call or do some work, we have a green room available on the lower level of this building. If you take the escalator or elevator down to the main floor, you'll see they will be on the right-hand side. There are coffee and water stations in this room in the back. And in the lobby, we'll have water stations in every session as well. If you require something else, please let us know and we'll do our best to accommodate you. The bathrooms are located outside of this main room in the lobby in the back corners. One is marked as gender neutral, and then we also have bathrooms on the lower level of this space, and there is a family restroom if you do need that for any reason. I just want to remind everyone we have a lot of great exhibitors here today. Our partners in the disability community and networks are here. So please take a moment while you're visiting the conference today to visit them, learn about what they do, and get some free swag. We do have green spaces for service animals if you have a service animal with you. They're located just outside of the building to the left or the west if you're facing the building. And if you did forget your waste bags, don't worry, we do have them at our registration table. After this plenary session ends, we will move to our morning breakout sessions. And again, there are 3: accessible employment, healthcare, and then AI in the digital world. These sessions will repeat at lunch, and each session is about 1 hour and 15 minutes. Lunch will be served back in this room at 12:45 p.m. We do have a lunch presenter who will start at 1:15, so at the conclusion of the morning breakout, we ask that you head back into the lobby to obtain your boxed lunch. And if you need any assistance carrying your boxed lunch, we're happy to do that. You will have, if you turn your name tag around, you'll see that there is a lunch ticket in your name tag, little surprise for you. Please hang on to that. You will need to turn that in to get your lunch for the day. We do have a variety of vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free options, and we also try to accommodate every dietary request that we receive, so just make sure that you connect with the lunch folks. Now that we have the logistics covered, I just want to wish you a good conference. I hope that you find today's information meaningful and accessible, and that you go out and share the information that you learned today. A reminder that today is a policy-related look at the things that impact the disability community, and so our goal is to try to effectuate change where it's needed and to pass that on to the folks that can help us make that change. So now that we have those logistics covered, we're going to move into our programming. It is my honor to introduce David Worthams, who is the chair of our Michigan Civil Rights Commission. In addition to his role on the commission, Chair Worthams is the Director of Employment Policy for the Michigan Manufacturers Association. He serves as part of the government affairs team representing over 1,700 Michigan-based manufacturers. Please join me in welcoming Chair Worthams to the podium.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 Civil Rights Summit on Disability Rights. My name is Dave Worthams. I am the chair of the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. Before we continue, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe people and recognizing their enduring connection to this place. As we reflect on the progress of the disability community, we honor the diverse histories and experiences that shape our collective journey toward inclusion. I am thrilled to welcome all of you to this critical conversation and to welcome your collaboration, a collective effort to identify barriers to full inclusion. But we don't want to stop there. Together, we will try to craft solutions that will help advance accessibility in all of its ramifications for people who too often face hurdles to opportunities that some of us take for granted. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission is deeply committed to protecting the civil rights of people with disabilities, and we take pride in the work of the Department of Civil Rights, which serves as our operational arm, and will investigate discrimination and work to prevent it before it occurs. The department is home to the Disability Rights and Compliance Division, which includes the ADA Compliance Unit for the state of Michigan, the Division on Deaf, Blind, and Hard of Hearing, and the Voluntary Service Animal Registry, all of which are dedicated to serving the needs of people with disabilities. And of course, our department's Enforcement Division, where intake staff, investigators, and our legal counsel do the constitutionally mandated work of enforcing civil rights laws throughout the state. But even with all the resources of the commission and the department, we need you. Your lived experience and your in-depth understanding and expertise and your own personal commitment to tearing down roadblocks that stand in the way of full inclusion. I can't wait to see what we are going to be able to accomplish together. And so, friends, I welcome you again to today's summit. I thank you for being here, and I ask that you have a wonderful time and that God expends his blessings upon you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Worthams, for setting the tone for the conference today. It is now my extreme pleasure to introduce Director John E. Johnson, Jr., who is the Executive Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Without his leadership and intentional commitment to the disability community, this event would not have come to fruition. Director Johnson has served in his current role with our department since 2011, and as such, he's also a member of Governor Whitmer's cabinet. Director Johnson oversees offices in Lansing, Grand Rapids, Flint, Marquette, and Detroit. He was born and raised in Buffalo, New York, and has earned his bachelor's degree from Howard University and a Juris Doctorate from Valparaiso University. He has been a member of the State Bar of Michigan for more than 41 years and has been involved with the Detroit NAACP since 1992. Please join me in welcoming our esteemed director to the podium.
Good morning, champions of change. We welcome you to our 4th annual Civil Rights Summit. I thank you, Tyra, for that introduction, but I would be remiss if I didn't say this is Tyra's brainchild. Let's thank her for this gathering this morning. Again, our 4th summit, but Tyra came to us last year indicating a desire to have this conference and has worked extremely hard, her division, along with our Strategic Initiatives and Public Information Division Director, Harold Core, to make this a reality. Let's give Harold a round of applause also. And certainly he didn't do this by himself. He has a tremendous team. I'm sure he'll introduce all of those individuals later. But again, thank you for being here. MDCR at its core is a law enforcement agency. We enforce state and federal civil rights laws, including the Michigan Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act and the Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act. And of course, the American Disabilities Act, you know it as the ADA. All legislation serves to protect people from discrimination on the basis of disability. One of the most surprising realities I encountered when I became the director of MDCR was how disability-based discrimination is so prevalent. Year after year, complaints filed with the allegation of discrimination on the basis of disability rank either first or second in terms of the total number of complaints our department receives. Consistently, disability-related complaints outpace every other basis with the exception of race. And even then, disability has topped race in most recent years. We have also seen a rise in the number of ADA Title II grievances filed with the state of Michigan, as well as a dramatic increase in requests for disability-related trainings. We cannot overstate the civil rights implications of an increasing level of discrimination against persons with disabilities. This trend clearly points to the critical need for education, awareness, and more inclusive, accessible systems throughout the state. Sadly, I suspect that even with the increasing number of complaints and grievances, the true scope of discrimination against people with disabilities goes underreported. As you know, most of us at some point in our lives will have a disability. The many issues related to disability and accessibility touch on every avenue of the human experience. There are countless important topics to explore when it comes to disability, rights, and inclusion. So what we discuss today is just a small sample. Today we will explore issues of accessibility and inclusion, as Tyra mentioned earlier, in 3 main areas: healthcare, employment, and technology. We will examine these issues through a policy lens to flesh out existing barriers, intersectionality, and lived experiences. And most importantly, we will search together for solutions. Last year's Civil Rights Summit was focused on fair housing and the many ways people face discrimination with their efforts to buy, sell, rent, or finance a home. People with disabilities, again, are high on the list of communities facing discriminatory barriers in the effort to house themselves and their families. After the summit, we produced a report, which you can find on our website, entitled No Place Like My Home, which outlined our in-depth examination of housing discrimination and presented a list of policy-based solutions. We shared that report and presented a list of policy recommendations with every member of the Michigan legislature and their policy staff. We are happy to report that one of the recommendations in that report, making it unlawful for landlords to discriminate against potential tenants based on their source of income, is now law. And we will follow the same course of action following this summit. I want to wrap up by thanking everyone who made this summit possible, in addition to Tyra and Harold, the organizers, volunteers, partners, presenters, MDCR staff, and most importantly, all of you. I also want to thank all of you in advance for your contributions to the important discussions we will engage in today. The solutions to the problems will come from you, the people who experience disability, your allies, families, and friends, and all those who advocate for and serve people with disabilities. So today we stand together, not to just talk about rights, but to be a part of a movement that transforms lives and shatters barriers. Because when we demand dignity and inclusion, we're shaping a future where everyone belongs. Thank you.
Look how high the microphone is after he walks away from the podium. Okay. Thank you, Director Johnson, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, for your continued leadership and commitment to the disability community. Most of you in this room know that buy-in starts at the top when you're trying to make change, and we really do have that when it comes to disability-related matters. So thank you. Next, we have a video with some welcoming remarks from Representative Debbie Dingell, who was unable to attend today. And so I will ask that we show the video at this time.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Debbie Dingell from the 6th District of Michigan, and it's really my honor to help welcome you to the 2025 Civil Rights Summit on Disability Rights. The theme for this year is accessibility beyond compliance in Michigan. How do we make it better for everybody? I wanted to be there with you today, and I'm sorry that I can't, but I'm glad to learn and hear about this conference and the wonderful opportunity that it is giving to gather Michigan residents who've had lived experiences, as well as disability rights experts and academics. As one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Bipartisan Disabilities Caucus, it's an issue that matters deeply to me. I believe it's important to assemble a variety of people with different backgrounds, different perspectives, different lived experiences to develop public policy recommendations that reflect the diversity of disabilities in our state. I want to thank each and every attendee for caring and for being willing to spend the day with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights and sharing your knowledge and experience regarding disability rights. It's through these interactions and conversations that we can find solutions and make progress. We're not going to solve all the problems, but we can keep making progress. I send a heartfelt thank you to all of the organizers, the volunteers, and the planning committee members who have worked tirelessly to make this event possible. Elected officials and policy leaders depend on the feedback that we get from you, the learned experiences from the people most affected by the policies we pass to determine how to best represent the communities we serve. This is your opportunity to play a part in shaping disability rights policy in the years to come. The Michigan Department of Civil Rights will create a summary of the discussions and the recommendations shared during this event, and that summary will be sent to policy leaders throughout Michigan. I want to also thank the Michigan Civil Rights Commission for showing years of leadership on civil rights issues in our state, including disability discrimination and accommodations. This July, in 2025, the Michigan Department of Civil Rights will celebrate its 60th anniversary. And we all look forward to another 60 years of expanding and protecting the rights that Michigan residents and visitors deserve. This is not an ordinary gathering. This is a powerful opportunity to amplify voices, discuss solutions, and ultimately drive meaningful change for Michigan communities. You know, I lived with the greatest man in the world. He was an outdoorsman. He ran every day. He was a hunter. The outdoors was his life. And in the last few years, his life changed, and he had a hard time getting around. And living with someone who faced those challenges taught me a lot and has made me think about many things differently. The diverse perspectives today of advocates, service providers, policymakers, community members makes this summit a very rare opportunity. Let this gathering remind us of the power we hold when we come together with a common good. Today, that goal is removing the barriers to access and creating a Michigan that values inclusivity as a strength. In other words, moving beyond compliance and making accessibility a point of pride. Thank you for being here today, and I can't wait to read the outcome of the day.
We thank Representative Dingell for taking the time to wish us well today. I will now move to our keynote morning address. Rebecca Cokley is the program officer for the Ford Foundation's first ever U.S. Disability Rights Program, which is focused on driving efforts at disconnecting disability and poverty, building a pipeline of diverse leadership, and mobilizing resources toward disability rights work. Prior to joining Ford, Rebecca was the co-founder and director of the Disability Justice Initiative at the Center for American Progress. She is also a 3-time presidential appointee, having served in key policy roles for the U.S. Department of Education as well as the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Rebecca sits on the board of directors for Rockwood Leadership Institute, the New York Women's Foundation, and Common Cause. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Cokley. I am a white woman with, this week, almost chin length red hair, a glorious abundance of freckles. I always say that because I like watching the ASL interpreter sign a glorious abundance of freckles. And I'm wearing a green jumpsuit. I am here in my personal capacity, though I like to say that I have one of the best day jobs out there as the first ever U.S. Disability Rights Program Officer for the Ford Foundation. So I am here as the daughter of Joan and Billy Hare, two lifelong disability rights advocates, and the mother of Jackson and Kendrick and Kaya, who will hopefully be the third generation of disability advocates in my family. I am also here as somebody who grew up on a community college campus where I watched my mom and my dad meet the needs of students with disabilities and put them on the path to success. Like my parents, I have dwarfism, which is an apparent disability, but I also live with chronic migraines. I always talk about that because people always assume my dwarfism is my most quote-unquote disabling condition, which it's not the Olympics. There's not like a gold medal, a silver medal, or a bronze medal for how much something affects you. But my migraines will keep me in bed for days at a time. My migraines result in vertigo, which make it impossible for me to travel sometimes. And so I think it's important if you have a hidden condition, if you feel safe, to be able to talk about it, because it creates a bigger tent for all people with disabilities to feel welcome at the table. I want to take a moment to thank Tyra and Patricia, Liliana, and Harold, and everyone who was involved in getting me here. I came out of Newark Airport, so at least I was able to get here. Not sure if I'm going to be able to get home, but at least I got here, so that's all that matters. I always start off my remarks by taking a moment to welcome all the people with disabilities in the room. Whether or not it is safe for you to self-identify publicly or professionally or personally, it matters that you're here. Our movement is infinitely strengthened by your presence in the space, and we are here to meet you where you are. I also want to acknowledge that here in Michigan, we're at the home of some pretty amazing advocates in the room. People like Dessa Cosma, Zach Damon, Micah Fiacca-Feldman, Baba Jones, Sam Bagenstos, Tamika Sitchin-Spruce, Chris Samp, and Bridget Heyman. My personal favorite, though, is no longer with us. His name was Big Ed. Big Ed Sassett drove a car company service that was based at Detroit Airport. And every time I would fly into Detroit, I would call Big Ed, and he would send one of his cars out to get me. He was a disabled small business owner and had a fleet of 12 cars, 10 of which were driven by people with disabilities. As a person with a disability, he was fully committed to disability employment in Michigan, and he saw firsthand how little opportunity there was. Big Ed passed away in 2018. The last time I saw him was 2016, and we had a conversation where he told me that 5 of his previous drivers now had their own fleets of vehicles. And so when I think about the disability legacy in the state of Michigan, it's as much about the big wins as it's about people like Big Ed, who every day had an intent to hire and promote and develop the next generation of disabled folks within the state. It's also important to remember that disability is much bigger than we think. I think oftentimes in civil rights conversations, a lot of the conversation is focused on what they see as sort of like the traditional disabilities. But we know, for example, here in Michigan, over 20% of the population has a disability. And over 22% of students in school identify as having a disability. This includes 10% of the US population that live with migraines, like me, mostly women. It includes the 26 million women who live with fibroids and are told that that's not really a disability, but yet it keeps you at home on a heating pad more days than not. When I heard that disability complaints outpace every other group but race, let's be real, was anybody in this room surprised by that? Because I wasn't surprised by that. There is not a day as a person with a visible and a non-visible disability that I don't experience at least one act of ableism, one act of discrimination. I was supposed to be in Michigan several months ago for another event, and I ended up having to cancel it because the media perpetuated this idea that the airlines hiring people with disabilities, including my own disability, dwarfism, had resulted in plane crashes and issues impacting the airline industry. I had received phone calls from a number of friends around the country with dwarfism and other disabilities telling me about the open harassment that they had faced when trying to fly on an airplane. And I was very thankful that when I went to our travel office at my job, and I said that I didn't feel safe to travel because I was afraid I would get harassed at the airport, that first off, they believed me. Because let's be real, how often as disabled people are we not believed when we tell somebody that something is happening to us? And second off, they actually personally reached out to our local airport and were like, we want to make sure that staff are not harassing people with disabilities who are flying. But I think that's a reality for so many of us. There is not a day where, as disabled people, we don't have to remind people of our rights and fight for our rights. As we speak right now, there are about 50 advocates on the front lawn in front of the United States Capitol who have been there for almost 24 hours at this point, fighting to save Medicaid, a program that millions of people with disabilities and our families depend on for our very survival. And I think it's important to shout them out in this moment, because disabled people have never gained any right in this country without protest, without speaking up. I see a lot of people share that diagram of the kids sitting in front of the fence, and it talks about reality and equality and equity and justice. And the first one is reality, and it's got one kid on like 7 blocks standing on the top one, being able to look over the fence. The next kid, who actually looks like a little person, but their butt's too small, is only on 1 block and barely looking over the fence. And then the third is somebody who can't even see over the fence with a single block. The next one is equity, and it's got blocks depending on how short the person is. The shorter the person, the more blocks. And I get really sick of seeing those diagrams because it sort of like ends at the equity line. And I really want to get past that. Why is the fence there to begin with? Let's actually tear down the fence so everyone can see equally what the opportunities are. We talk a lot about discrimination against people with disabilities, and I think it's actually important to actually unpack what is ableism. And I use the definition developed by my good friend and colleague, Talila Lewis, who talks about ableism as a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on how society thinks about normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, colonialism, and eugenics. This form of oppression leads people in society determining who is valuable or worthy based on someone's appearance and/or their ability to satisfactorily produce, reproduce, excel, and behave. And you don't have to be disabled to experience ableism. When we talk about ableism, we often talk about forms of discrimination like they have spaces on a map. Like, over there is where racism lives. Over here is where sexism is. Over here is where classism is. When we understand the reality is much more complex and much more interconnected than that. Can anyone in this room tell me what the first mental illness was in the quote unquote, discovered in the United States? What was that? Hysteria? Close, but no. Drapetomania. Does anyone know what drapetomania was? Drapetomania is runaway slave syndrome. The first mental illness ever created in the United States of America was manufactured as a means of arresting and returning slaves who had escaped slavery for the North. So when we talk about the history of racism and ableism in America, the roots come from the same tree. And we have to remember that these things do not exist in silos, but they exist in a very seriously interconnected way. They actually made up a mental illness and said that slaves did not run away because they wanted to. They were ill, and they needed their owners. They needed landowners to collect them and bring them back to the safety of the plantation. I want you to think about that, especially today as we talk about the context of putting people with disabilities on work camps, which is what we continue to hear about today. We aren't that far from that past, but we have a heck of a lot of work we have to do to change the future. All roads to inequality cut through disability. We think about the problematic and inaccurate framing of disability, and we understand that approaches have to be intersectional for them to be effective. One of my good friends, Maurice Mitchell, who runs an organization called the Working Families Party, is known for saying, you know, your individual anxiety about possibly getting things wrong has nothing to do with my liberation. And I think about that a lot. I think about how often people play euphemism bingo with disabilities. I can't tell you how many times someone's like, well, you're statutorily challenged. You're height impaired. No, I have a disability. You're not disabled, you're just short. Yeah, but when I get discriminated out on the street, it's because I'm disabled. And I think people are so uncomfortable with discomfort that we don't have the conversations that really need to matter anytime, but especially now. You know, the COVID pandemic left us with a minimum of at least 10 million newly disabled people because of long COVID. Michigan had one of the highest death rates and also one of the largest long COVID rates. And I would bet most of those people are not in this room today because this room is not safe for people with long COVID. So I want you to take a beat and think about who isn't here. It matters as much, if not more so, than who is here if we're talking about being inclusive of the disability community. Existing programs and systems remain beyond stretched, and we know that the caregiver shortage is a real issue. And how have we gotten here? I think part of it is, frankly, we as a community, and I'm talking about all of us, not just disabled people, but people who exist in our space, haven't communicated our issues, our mission, and our vision well. I think the fact that in every state, Medicaid goes by a different name, and some of them are really cute names. It's like somebody had like those contests where, like I know in Michigan, you guys have contests where you name snowplows. And it's like Snowy McSnowplow and things like that. I feel like somebody had a similar contest on how you name Medicaid in every state. So people actually are on Medicaid and access those benefits without understanding it is in fact Medicaid. I don't know what it's called. It might be called like Band-Aid McMedicaid or something. I don't know. But we need to think about how do we communicate the importance of these programs? How do we communicate about them? How do we communicate the needs of our community? And do so in such a way that reminds people that we are not weak. We are a strong community, we are a passionate community, and we get the job done. We're currently watching 50 years of disability progress under attack. There's a court case right now that is actively attempting to overturn the Americans with Disabilities Act, saying that schools and entities that operate in good faith shouldn't be seen as violating the Americans with Disabilities Act. So if someone smiles at you while they discriminate against you, well, that's in good faith. They're not actively trying to oppress you. They're not actively trying to take away your rights. This is why rights enforcement is so critically important in this moment. We're watching the dissolution of the Administration for Community Living, which is critically important to ensuring that disabled people have the right to live in our homes and not nursing homes. And when you look at the budget, the federal budget, and I'm already watching it trickle down to the states in this moment, we're talking about $1.3 trillion, that's with a T, in cuts to the programs that disabled people and our families and our children depend on for survival. Everything from early intervention services to FEMA services that make sure if you're elderly or disabled, that you get told when a hurricane is 20 minutes away from your house. From the womb to the tomb, the modern disability infrastructure, the infrastructure that our elders crawled up the steps of the US Capitol, the infrastructure that my godmother Anne got arrested for chaining herself to a bus back in the 70s, fought for. may not be here in a year's time. And it's imperative that we talk about this and the implications for us and our loved ones and our community. So I want to talk about an economic agenda. I'm in Michigan, right? So I'm not in Ohio, right? I used to share an office at the White House with an Ohio State person and a University of Michigan person. I went to the best school. I went to UC Santa Cruz. We're home of the banana slugs. Y'all can't touch our mascot. But you know what I learned? I learned both schools fight songs because they used to make each other sing it when they would beat each other in sports. But y'all don't like each other. So my question is, why is Ohio further along than y'all when it comes to eliminating the sub-minimum wage? I mean, they just introduced a bill yesterday to eliminate the sub-minimum wage. But aren't y'all the home of labor? Aren't y'all the home of workers' rights? Economic development? If I have to come here next year and sing the Ohio State fight song because y'all haven't moved on the sub-minimum wage, I'm going to be really depressed. I actually have to re-look up the lyrics because I don't remember it because Michigan beats them so much more. So come on, Michigan, I want to see y'all get with it. We also need to raise asset limits. So if you're making more money, you can actually save that money. And not only can you save that money, but you should be able to get married. We live in a place and a time where marriage equality has not come for the disability community yet. And where if you are married and you may need Medicaid, you might have to get divorced to access those benefits. I got a phone call a few weeks ago from a reporter who had met a family in Pennsylvania where the dad had gotten a promotion at the job, and they were actively talking about how was he going to have to turn down the promotion, or were he and his wife going to have to divorce? How is that family values? I question every time I hear people talk about family values, and then I bring up the fact that disabled people are forced to divorce, or parents of disabled children are forced to divorce. The state, the government is telling you that you cannot be married because you or your loved one needs health insurance. That seems like an overreach, doesn't it? I don't want the state in my house telling me how I live. But yet, for people with disabilities, your right to make choices is overruled repeatedly by what the state and the federal government think disabled people are capable of. I had an intern when I ran the National Council on Disability who had spinal muscular atrophy. And he got into Harvard. Yes, it's Harvard. I know it's not University of Michigan. He got into Harvard with a full ride to law school. And he had to turn it down because he would get 11 hours of home care in Illinois. Yeah, I know it's Illinois, whatever. I know there's some Illinois people in the room. Y'all are cool. But he had to turn it down because he would get 11 hours of home care in Michigan, in Illinois versus 6 hours that he was promised in Massachusetts. We have to have Medicaid portability in this country. We have to have people be able to move where they want to move for opportunities, for jobs, for careers, for love, without being blackmailed by the loss of their benefits. It is frankly unacceptable in 2025 that you can't decide where you want to live without losing your health insurance. It prevents the ability of disabled small business owners to grow and thrive, and it prevents our social and economic mobility as disabled people and as people who vote and have incomes. So what I would really encourage us to think about as we go forward and as we think about the day is, are disabled people at the table with you? I know there's a bunch of us here, but I know for a fact we're not in every room we need to be in. How are we communicating to let people with disabilities know that we need you in the room? I always take the ramp at events. I don't always need the ramp, but I always take the ramp because I want to remind people that there are people that do need the ramp. I actually walk with a cane most times. There's two reasons, one of which is it's easier to knock people out of my way. My husband doesn't like it, but he's not here, so he can't roll his eyes at me on that one. And the other is because that way people don't think I'm a child and try to grab me, which happens quite frequently. I'd rather them think I'm a little old lady. They got the little and lady part, right? Not the old part yet. But it's things like, how do we communicate the presence of disabled people in spaces when we need to be in the room, and the room is often not set up for us, or the room is not physically, culturally, or programmatically accessible for us? How do we create internships in state government for students with disabilities? I think that's a huge opportunity in places like Michigan, where there's such a tremendous bench of disabled leaders. How do we actually put young people with disabilities on the career pipelines that they need to grow and thrive and have the expectation of employment? You know, and how do we get beyond performatory allyship? You know, when someone from the same non-marginalized group professes support and solidarity with a marginalized group in a way that either isn't helpful or actively harms the group. Performative allyship usually involves the ally receiving some kind of reward. You see this a lot on social media. It's that virtual pat on the back or that participation trophy for being a good person and being on the right side. How do we actually unpack that and move people into a conversation around being an active accomplice versus just being an ally? And that term was defined by Jamila Thomas and Brianna Agamong. I think it's really important that we cite the people whose language we use. So it means showing up when it's not easy, creating standards for how we work. I had a Zoom call several weeks ago, and we were waiting on the ASL interpreter, and the ASL interpreter was stuck in traffic. And so we just sat there. And I was watching the people who organized the call and the people who paid for the call start to get more and more nervous, start to get a little sweaty around the collar, which we can tell on Zoom when that happens. And it started getting really awkward. They're like, well, can we just start? And the co-presenters and I were like, nope. And they're like, why? I'm like, no ASL interpreter, we're not starting until the interpreter gets here. Because this is a disability event, and all means all. And if we were to let that go, we would be more part of the problem than part of the solution. And I think we all have moments in our day where afterwards we're like, you know, I was kind of part of the problem there. You know, I didn't speak up about that. I should have said something. Now is the time that we move from the I should have to I did damn well say something. I like to say that your privilege is like a checkbook, and you owe it to yourself to balance your checkbook once a month and think about how did you use the privilege in the spaces that you were in to change the conversation, change who was there, and change what was talked about. I would also remind everyone, as my dear friend Brittany Cunningham says, that budgets are moral documents. You spend your money on what you care about. And so we need to think about where are we spending our money and how does it communicate our values. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions for a few moments. And just also noting, I am not here on behalf of the Ford Foundation. I'm here in my personal capacity, so I can't talk about Ford stuff. I don't think it's got you. Here.
Thank you. Tyra speaking. At this time, if you have questions on cards, we'll have staff come around and collect them. But if you do want to ask a question directly, please signal and we will bring the mic to you or to an interpreter. And please identify your name before us commenting.
Oh, good, there's questions.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Myers, and I am from Oakland County. I live in Oakland County, and my question to you is, I'm concerned about the government and decisions that they're making in terms of the Medicaid and what the future is going to look like for us if we do lose those benefits.
I'm concerned too, Cheryl. I would encourage folks to keep an eye on the conversations that are happening both in Washington and at the state level. I would encourage you to reach out to whoever you need to reach out to locally and at the state level and weigh in with the concerns. It's important that people hear from us. And I think the reality is our stories are powerful. And figuring out the different ways that we can harness our power in this moment. There are some phenomenal organizers here in the state. And I think people listen to people from Michigan. I lived in DC. Nobody ever listened to us, and I literally could see the Capitol from my house. But you all have a voice that people pay attention to. And I think finding ways to weigh in, finding ways to use your voice, finding ways to push back is going to be really important in this moment.
If I could do a follow-up question or statement, us being here, maybe we could get some type of a written petition and have people start signing that and submit it to the government to saying, hey, we need more support services. We need our insurance. We need that support. So that's another idea that I want to throw out there while we're all here together. I think it's a good opportunity to have some papers signed and sent to the government. That's just an opinion I have.
Absolutely. Over there in the corner. Could you make sure Shayla's mic is on? Nope. Try it now. It sounds like something bounced.
Good morning. My name is Shayla Lung. I am a person of the neurodivergent community, and I have a question in regards to with having internships within employment with those with disability. Growing up in the public school system, I had the opportunity and privilege to have an IEP, but I didn't use it. When I went to university, I did use it. But both of those environments allowed me the opportunity to succeed and flourish because I have a learning disability. Mm-hmm. I was luckily diagnosed as a Black woman at 10 with ADHD. However, there aren't many resources to explain the complexity of neurodiversity. What could you encourage employers to take heed in the interactive process for accommodations? Or even how to have more representation about neurodiversity in the workplace because it is an invisible disability. It's not we're clumsy, we're quirky, we're bubbly, we're talky. There's so much that goes on in our head that we have to prepare for. We have to remind ourselves to not be loud. We have to take energy in not over talking because we're excited or we'll forget and it's interpreted as you're being rude, you're demanding the conversation. I'm just happy to talk about something that is relevant and my special interest. But when it is interpreted and perceived by neurotypicals, what can you do to eliminate the barriers? Because neurodivergent persons have to take time to learn how to behave and engage with all neurotypical people. Where is the conversation that neurotypical people are learning and engaging to understand the neurodivergent community?
First off, Shayla, thank you. Because wouldn't the world be such a better place if non-disabled people actually had to take classes to learn how to engage with disabled people?
My degree is from Eastern Michigan University in the science of communication.
Oh, that's awesome.
So my special interest is the rhetoric behind communication dynamics.
Ooh.
So this has a name, this distance. When you're kissing someone 18 inches or less apart, that has a name. My favorite theory is the Johari window. It's a 2x2. There's what's known to you and known to others. Known to you, unknown to others. Unknown to others, unknown to you. Unknown to you, known to others.
Can we find some time to talk about this, because I totally want to learn all about this. This is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I do think you really bring up an important point. And I think especially as we watch all these employers move to jump on employment of people with neurodiversities without a lot of times actually hiring people with neurodiversity in the leadership of these programs, which to me is always the most suspect thing. I'm like, who's running your program? And then what's the promotion rate of people? How are they getting promoted? How are they getting retained? Or is it like a one-stop shop for bringing people in, and then you're not accommodating them, they're not getting mentored, they're not getting professionally developed, and then you just send them on their way? I'm looking at, I know some programs that are pretty interesting. I know the Neurodiversity Alliance, which used to be called something else, and I'm blanking on what it used to be called. They changed their name in the last year. Has been doing a lot of work around creating solutions and programming and supports for neurodiverse folks entering the workforce. I also know that the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and their ACI program has done a lot of work on this, but there really needs to be much greater attention to how we make workplaces inclusive and work well for everyone, because here's the tip. When you make something inclusive of disabled people, it works way better for everybody else. I always use the example, I had a coworker who had been in the workplace for a long time. And we noticed that she always used whenever we would use captions to make an event accessible, she always relied on the captions. And we would say, it's really great that you use them. Oh, I don't use them. I look at them to make sure that they work for everybody else. And I remember one time that the captioner didn't show up, they had the flu. And we noticed that she didn't catch anything that was talked about. And afterwards she came and she was like, I have the biggest secret to tell you. And all the disabled people are like, really, what? And she's like, I use the captions too. And honestly, that's why I make the habit of actually welcoming people to the disability community in my remarks. It's for Betty. It's for people like Betty who are not yet at a place where they feel comfortable self-identifying. And it's important that we create that space, but then we also openly advocate for more inclusive workplaces, because it works better for Betty. It works better for Bob. And creating a space where they feel safe self-identifying and having their needs met make it better for everybody. Okay. Okay, fine.
This is Kim speaking. Tyra, we have another question.
This is Tyra speaking. We are running out of time, so we're going to have to hold the rest of the questions. I apologize for that. This does conclude our morning session. Our next session, the breakouts will begin at 11:15, so you'll have a break right now to fill your coffee, use the restroom. Thank you so much to Rebecca Cokley for those really inspiring words. They were wonderful. And again, I do apologize for not getting to more questions. We just have so much to get through today. We do have your questions on cards, and we will get answers to your questions from Rebecca and send them out to attendees via the Whova app or email. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.